This man was swallowed in his sleep by a sinkhole. On February 28, 2013, just before midnight, the quiet town of Seffner, Florida was shattered by a nightmare that still haunts many to this day. 37-year-old Jeff Bush had just gone to bed, unaware that a hidden danger lay directly beneath him. Without warning, the ground beneath his bedroom collapsed, creating a massive sinkhole that stretched 20 feet across and at least 50 feet deep. In seconds, Jeff and everything around him was gone, completely swallowed by the sinkhole with no chance to escape. Hearing the chaos, Jeff's brother Jeremy raced into the room. He saw nothing but a gaping hole where Jeff's bed had been moments before. Desperate, Jeremy tried to pull him out, risking his own life, but it was too late. Jeff was sadly dead. Rescue teams arrived quickly, but the ground continued to crumble, making it too dangerous for anyone to go in after Jeff. And after hours of searching, it was clear that Jeff would never be recovered. The sinkhole was too unstable and too deep. Sadly, Jeff's body was never recovered.
Jacqueline Durant, she was a dog sitter. Her face was nearly erased by a dog sitting job gone wrong.
Oh wait, I think I saw this.
A couple of days before, she had visited the dogs. The dogs acted normal, not aggressive. Their names were Lucy, a German Shepherd mix, and Bender, which was a Boxer Pit Bull mix. And they were both rescue dogs. Owners had promised Jacqueline that the dogs would have been caged when she would arrive, so she wouldn't have to worry about them being aggressive. But when the day came, the owners had texted Jacqueline saying that they failed to put them in the cages or whatever. So whenever Jacqueline arrived, as soon as she opened the door, the dogs attacked her. They dragged her into the living room. They tore off her ears, her nose, her lips. They bit her 800 different times all over her body, bro. And there's body cam footage of the cops arriving to the scene. It took them 37 minutes to finally find the opening.
We can't make entry because of the dogs.
Ma'am, can you hear me? Are you the only one inside? Is a big dog right next to you?
So they rushed her to the hospital, lost 30% of her blood, and she was resuscitated multiple times. To make this shit more fucked up was the owners, they had a sign in front of the door that said, "Warning, crazy dogs, do not knock or don't ring the doorbell."
What? Why would they let her try to dog sit those dogs?
Because apparently he said that we have children in the house. They never showed no signs of being aggressive.
I have 3 kids, one's 3 years old. No history of violence, none.
If they're well behaved, why would they have that?
Just the way you are. That's our song.
The happy couple left the reception under a canopy of sparklers.
On their beginning of the golf cart ride, she said, "I wish this night could go on forever." The best night of her life.
Sam and Eric.
Just a few hours after the wedding ended, the bride would be dead. On April 28, 2023, this woman, Samantha Miller, married her favorite person in the world, Eric Hutchinson. The two had dated for a very long time and were super excited to finally tie the knot. So after months of preparation, the two finally got married in April of 2023. It was a beautiful ceremony and procession according to everyone who attended, and the couple was sent off with this amazing sparkler display. But just moments after leaving the wedding in a low-speed vehicle, they were struck from behind by a driver speeding in another car. Unfortunately, it was a devastating crash, and shortly after the crash, Samantha Miller would be pronounced dead on her own wedding night. The driver of the other vehicle was Jamie Lee Komorowski. Jamie had been speeding 65 miles per hour in a 25 mile per hour zone, and her blood alcohol level was 3 times over the legal limit. It was her reckless driving that ended Samantha Miller's life. Eerily, Jamie's Instagram is still up, and her last post, posted 4 days before the accident, said, "Did someone say tequila?" I mean, it's just disturbing. This is obviously a horrific story, and I hope that there's justice at the end of the day, and that Jamie gets used to the inside of a prison cell. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
Could a teenager have accidentally burned to death inside of an oven at Walmart? Something hideous happened on the 19th of October this year at Walmart in Canada. Now, the shop had apparently been looking to remove the walk-in ovens from the stores, but before they were able to, tragedy would strike. Gurismaran Kaur, aged 19, moved to Canada 2 years ago with her mum from India. The pair both worked at the Walmart store, and on the day in question, the girl's mum realised she hadn't been able to get hold of her in a while. It had been roughly an hour, so she went looking and tried to investigate. After looking high and low, her mum eventually discovered her daughter's body locked in an oven. A frantic call came into emergency services and a dispatch officer told them, "Female is locked in an oven in the bakery. Oven is on, unsure if the staff are able to turn it off." Iris Moran was removed from the oven, but tragically it was too late. Her mum was obviously completely traumatized by this whole situation, and it remains somewhat a mystery how she even ended up there in the first place. Walmart employees have posted videos online claiming that the whole situation is really strange. They have stated there would be no way that she would get in of her own accord, and some have claimed that the door is really hard to open. There were apparently no tasks that would ever require anyone to actually physically get inside of the oven. One employee stated, "You have to push with all your might to pull the handle to the side and lock it in place." They added, "There is no way possible that someone could lock themselves in there."
I really have no words for this. Josef Fritzl, the man who imprisoned his own daughter for 24 years, repeatedly sexually assaulted her, and had 7 children with her, is being released to a regular prison. This is a big deal for many reasons, and it's really scary. So for the past 15 years, Josef has been in a high security unit for mentally disturbed patients at Stein prison in Krems, Austria. This is because in 2008, it was discovered that he had been holding his daughter Elizabeth captive in a makeshift prison chamber in the basement of the family home. I'll go more into detail about what took place in just a second. But basically, in 1984, when Elizabeth was 18 years old, her dad Josef lured her into the basement of their Amstetten home and into a soundproof bunker that he built. Over the next 24 years, he would repeatedly sexually assault her, resulting in him fathering 7 children with her. This would all come to light in 2008, when one of their babies became sick and needed urgent medical attention. When he took the baby to the hospital, the doctor became suspicious and alerted authorities, who then asked for the baby's mom to come forward. So Josef released Elizabeth from the bunker, and she was then able to tell authorities how she'd been held captive for the past 24 years, and Josef was ultimately arrested. At the time of her rescue, Elizabeth was 42 years old. Josef was sentenced in 2009 to life in prison after being convicted of incest, 3,000 instances of sexual assault, false imprisonment, negligent homicide of one of the children, and a bunch of other charges. After a psychological evaluation deemed him extremely psychologically abnormal, he was then transferred to spend his sentence in that high security unit for mentally disturbed patients in Krem. It's now been 15 years, and after a recent psychiatric assessment, he was granted release to a regular prison. The verdict was based on the fact that he's now 88 years old and reportedly has dementia and no longer poses a danger to society. As a condition, he will need to attend regular psychotherapy every 3 months over the next 10 years as part of a probation period. But this is a big deal for many reasons, and it's incredibly alarming. His lawyer, Astrid Wagner, is actually pushing for his release to be into a nursing home and not a regular prison. She's working on his early release into the public as we speak. According to Austrian law, those who are sentenced to life in prison are potentially eligible for parole after 15 years. And in Josef's case, that would be March of this year. His lawyer Astrid just stated, quote, "He regrets what he did and he was actually close to tears. Based on Josef's recent evaluation, I wouldn't be frightened to move in with him in a flat share arrangement. He no longer poses a sex drive." End quote. Just her statement alone is disgusting. And I know he's 88 now and has dementia, but let me tell you why this is so alarming. As I explained earlier, that day in 1984, he lured his daughter Elizabeth into the basement of the family home under the pretense that he needed help installing a door. Unknown to Elizabeth, he had built a makeshift prison chamber in the style of a Cold War bunker, and once she helped him install the door, he rendered her unconscious and locked her inside. What's absolutely crazy about this case is that Josef lived with his wife and other children upstairs, and they were all reportedly unaware of the horrors taking place in the basement. A little while after Elizabeth disappeared, her mom filed a missing persons report, but Josef told friends, family, and the police that she ran away to join a cult. He would then force Elizabeth to write letters from the basement telling everyone that she was okay and not to look for her. Over the next 24 years, he repeatedly sexually assaulted her, which resulted in him fathering 7 children with her, 3 of which he also held in captivity with Elizabeth, while the others he brought upstairs to raise with his wife and other children. One of the children held in captivity with Elizabeth died shortly after birth because Josef failed to get them medical attention. That baby was cremated by Josef. Josef told his wife that the 3 children he brought up just so happened to be placed on their doorstep. After he was arrested, Josef initially told police that what he did to Elizabeth was consensual, not sexual assault. But then he stated that he always knew it wasn't right, it just became normal. But despite that, he said that he always treated Elizabeth and the kids in captivity well by bringing them flowers and toys. He also initially stated that he felt compelled to imprison Elizabeth because she wouldn't follow the rules, but he ultimately admitted to locking her up for his own gratification. He went on to say, quote, "I was born to RAPE. I held myself back for a very long time. I could have behaved a lot worse than locking up my daughter," end quote. Josef also admitted to locking his own mother in the attic of that same family home. He boarded up all of the windows and told neighbors that his mom had died, but in reality, she was likely locked in that attic for nearly 20 years until her death in 1980. If all of this is not alarming enough, Josef also had an extensive criminal history prior to this. In 1967, Josef broke into the home of a 24-year-old nurse and sexually assaulted her while holding a knife up to her throat, threatening to kill her if she screamed. He only served 1 year in prison for that crime and had his criminal history expunged after 15 years due to Austrian law. Adding to this, Josef is also suspected of several murders. The first is the murder of 17-year-old Martina Claudia Posch, who disappeared on November 12, 1986. Her body was found 10 days later in a lake, and her cause of death was strangulation. At the time of her murder, Josef ran a guest house near where her body was found, and she really resembled his daughter Elizabeth. He's also suspected of murdering 17-year-old Anna Newmayer, who was killed on August 17, 1966. She disappeared within 20 miles of where Josef worked at the time. Then there's the murder of 42-year-old Gabriela Supkova, who was killed in 2007. Her body was found in the exact same location where Josef was conveniently on vacation. Although he's suspected of these murders, he's never been formally charged due to lack of evidence. So, like I said, I know he's old now and has dementia, but Josef is an evil person, and I personally don't think he should ever be released back into society. And I can't believe that this is even a thing with everything that he's done. What are your thoughts on this?
Charles Manson, since he was young, he started doing some crazy shit. When he was 9 years old, he actually got charged with arson because he lit his elementary school on fire.
What?
When he was 18 years old, he ended up taking advantage of some kid with a knife. Most of his life, he was in jail. He ended up moving to California, right? Hippie culture was big over there.
Yeah.
Somehow, he used his charm and shit and the fact that he played music to, like, associate with these people. He ended up making, like, a little group. Although it was, like, a hippie group, he hated that word, so he called it a slippy
group.
Yeah, and it was because of how they would slip into people's houses and steal shit, bro, which was a cult. And later on it was called the Manson family. He had this weird obsession and this weird thought in his mind that eventually there was going to be this war, a race war between blacks and whites, and it was mainly because a song by the Beatles called Helter Skelter, he got inspiration from it. He said that when he heard that song, it spoke to him. And I'm gonna show you an interview of just how crazy he actually was.
I can do anything I want to you people at any time I want to, because that's what you've done to me. If you spit in my face and smack me in the mouth and throw me in solitary confinement for nothing, what do you think's gonna happen when I get out of here? Maybe I should have killed 400 or 500 people, then I would have felt better. Then when I felt like I really offered society something. You know, if I wanted to kill somebody, I'd take this book and beat you to death with it, and I wouldn't feel a thing. Are you mad? Do you feel like Wolf's kebab for French?
Welcome back to my channel. Welcome back to another video. If it's your first time here, or if it's your first time watching my videos, hi.
The woman you just saw in that video murdered her own daughter with the help of 2 family members because she believed that her daughter was possessed by a demon. This is Claudia Hernandez. In September of 2021, Claudia thought her 2-year-old daughter Arlie was acting weird. According to her, her daughter's eyes changed. They were vacant and empty. She claimed that her daughter's voice wasn't her own, and she said that she knew she was possessed by a demon. Claudia told investigators, "I knew it was a demon because I go to church." So at one point, Claudia put her fingers into her daughter's mouth to try force her to vomit, and when she did that, her daughter bit down on her. She claimed that's when she knew this was a possession, and so she brought her daughter into a church. Claudia then got her brother and her father to meet them at the church, and they performed an exorcism on the little girl. An exorcism that lasted over 20 hours, where the 3 of them were putting their hands around the girl's neck, choking her out, abusing her, holding her up in the air, throwing her around, screaming at her. And heartbreakingly, even when Arlie told her own mother, "I love you," as she was dying, Claudia claimed that that was a demon. Now, that video I showed you at the beginning of this was actually posted after Claudia had murdered her daughter. Yeah, she thought she'd start up a YouTube channel after killing her kid. Obviously, that didn't end up going too well because she was arrested. And this story's flat out disturbing. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
This boy did to a child is absolutely horrific, and he may soon be released from prison. It was the summer of 2015 in Santa Cruz, California. Maddie Middleton was a sweet 8-year-old girl who lived in an affordable housing complex with her mum. Now, Maddie would regularly play outside in the summertime like loads of other children would. Disturbingly though, she then vanished. When she wasn't home by 6:30 that evening, her mum started to panic and went round all of the local houses knocking on the door asking if anyone had seen her daughter. Unfortunately, there was no news and she had to get the FBI involved. Now, they started scouring the local area and looking everywhere, horrifically even in like the recycling bins. That's when they noticed they were being watched. 15-year-old Adrian Gonzalez was just sort of stood by watching them and asking them strange questions about the crime. To make matters worse and even more suspiciously, as soon as they recovered a body from the recycling bins, he started sprinting off. They detained him while his mum watched on in horror. The police expected him to just say nothing, and actually what they got was a horrifying confession. He stated that he had lured the little girl into his apartment with an ice cream. He then duct taped her mouth shut and SA'd the child. He then brutally stabbed her and strangled her to death before dumping her in a recycling bin. Now, he was charged as an adult despite being 15 at the time and was charged with murder but pleaded not guilty. The Supreme Court eventually overturned the fact that he was going to be charged as an adult and he was sentenced to spend some time in a juvenile facility. It was determined he would remain there until he was 25, which was this year. As far as I can see, it's still being decided whether he's going to be released or not.
This is Travis the Chimp, one of the worst animal attacks ever recorded, explained. This is Travis the Chimp, and he lived with Sandra and Jerome Harold since he was a young chimp. And was often treated like a member of the family, but one day something happened. He exhibited unusually aggressive behavior, which made the Harolds call their friend Nash for assistance. But when Nash arrived at the Harolds' home, Travis the Chimp suddenly attacked her. And the attack was extremely gruesome. Travis the Chimp targeted Nash's face and hands. It ripped off both of her eyelids and then proceeded to rip her nose clean off, blinding her and also severing several parts of her body and lacerating her face. Travis the Chimp was then shot and killed by police who arrived at the scene. But Nash's injuries were so severe that she had to undergo a face transplant and lost both of her hands in an attempt to save her life. But miraculously, she would survive. I would show you pictures of the attack, but they're extremely gruesome and I probably can't show them on here. So instead, I will play the 911 call made by the Harolds as Nash was being attacked by Travis the Chimp. And you can hear Travis the Chimp in the video going absolutely crazy.
This is the haunting last footage of Kyler Effinger, who died a few weeks ago after crawling into a plane's engine at the Salt Lake City International Airport. On January 1st, 30-year-old Kyler went to the airport to board a flight to Denver to visit his sick grandpa. But as he was checking in, there was a problem with security, which caused him to miss his flight. As you can see in the video, this caused Kyler to become really upset, and he then began using his shoe to try and break one of the airport's windows. After unsuccessfully trying to open multiple locked doors, Kyler then ran to the south end of the airport and managed to kick open a terminal's emergency exit door, which opened up to a stairwell. He's then seen running onto the tarmac as a plane is starting to take off. This all happened at around 10 p.m. that night, and as a result, a store manager inside the airport who witnessed the disturbance called the Salt Lake City police. When authorities arrived, they were given a description of the man and began to search for him, and they eventually found some of the man's clothing and shoes on one of the airport's runways. About 10 minutes into the search, Kyler was spotted at one of the airport's de-icing pads, and he was then seen going underneath the moving plane and into its engine. The plane that was moving was on its way to San Francisco. It was flight number 2348 and it carried 95 passengers. The passengers became terrified as the plane came to a halt and as police sped down the tarmac surrounding the plane. According to some of the passengers, the pilot came on the intercom and said that there was a security event and that the man police were looking for was surrounding them. Authorities asked air traffic controllers to tell the pilot to turn off the plane's engines, but unfortunately, it was too late. Police found Kyler unconscious, partially inside one of the plane's wing-mounted engines, which, although it was turned off, it was still rotating. Authorities began CPR and administered naloxone, but sadly, Kyler was pronounced dead at the scene. And unfortunately, some passengers on the plane witnessed the entire thing. An autopsy will be conducted to determine Kyler's cause and manner of death, and the Salt Lake City Police as well as the FAA are still investigating the incident. But according to Kyler's family, his most likely cause of death was due to head trauma, which reportedly happened very fast. Kyler struggled with mental health for nearly a decade after being bullied all throughout school and into college, and he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder when he was 20 years old. Kyler's family believes that he was suffering from a mental health episode that night stemming from missing his flight, which likely sent him into a manic episode resulting in his death. Kyler reportedly called his dad after he missed his flight and was trying to rebook, but according to his dad, just by talking to him on the phone, he knew it wasn't going to end well. He just never thought that this would be the outcome. Kyler lived in Park City, Utah, and was described as having the world's biggest heart. His parents are now wanting to try and use this horrific situation to help others struggling with mental health.
Show you a video, and this is a very viral video. A lot of people know this video. Okay.
You murdered your own son?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
At the end of murdering all the people on earth, I was going to murder my own family and then take my own life and become God.
What do you think of the death penalty?
I'm opposed to it.
The state has no right to take your life, but you can murder other people?
I don't think anyone has the right to take a life.
Except you?
When I'm under hallucination, I do.
Do you ever feel violent?
Yes, I do.
What do you feel like doing?
Killing people.
Do you think you'd murder me, Joe?
What the fuck?
Yes.
That's gruesome, Joe.
Yes, it is.
And you don't blame me if I say I hope you never get out of this place.
I hope I never do either.
What the fuck? That was Josef Kallinger. At a young age, he's unwanted by his biological father. Leaves, he's like, I don't want no part in this, fuck this child. His mother can't afford taking care of him by herself, puts him up for adoption. And then this Austrian family adopts him, but with no good intention and shit. Basically, all they wanted him to do was work for them, because they were shoemakers. He sat on that, like when he was 10 or 9, he got assaulted and shit. For a long time, he just had this fixation with knives. Whenever he would watch pornography, he would have to do it by stabbing the image. And like holding the knife in his hand the whole time. So now move on to when he started killing people, right? His son Michael was actually the one to help him with these murders.
What the fuck?
His first victim was a 10-year-old Puerto Rican boy.
Oh my gosh.
But with the help of his son Michael, they lured him in to like an abandoned factory, tortured him, killed him. Second victim was his 14-year-old son. He wanted to kill way more people, bro. And it was all because
Loyal pet dog solved his owner's murder and put her killer behind bars. Mandy Rose Reynolds was a 26-year-old woman from Idaho. She lived with her white-haired Labradoodle named Titan. Titan would prove to be such a loyal boy right to the very end. On the 5th of April 2023, a frantic call came in to report a fire in Robinson in Texas. Titan was found barking hysterically in the field when emergency services got there. He was stood next to a plastic storage container. Inside were the remains of a victim who was so badly burned they were unrecognizable. The poor dog stood there yelping and police eventually recovered the body. Titan, however, would not move from that spot. Police desperately tried to capture him, but he wouldn't let them. The following day, Titan remained there. He was still glued to that spot. Animal Services eventually got involved and went and rescued the dog and looked at his microchip to see who his owner was. It turned out his owner was Mandy Reynolds. Police were notified of this and went to Mandy's home to see what was going on. They realised there was a good chance this was their victim, and when they showed up to her house, they found it had been completely emptied. Her car had also been taken off the drive. Authorities knew that if they could find this car, they might have cracked the case. They started tracking the vehicle, and on the 8th of the month, they spotted it. Inside the car, driving it, was Mandy's cousin. This was 29-year-old Derek Dainault. Police attempted to pull him over, but he refused, and a high-speed car chase ensued. The cars reached speeds over 100 miles an hour, and eventually Derek crashed the car. He then fled on foot into a shop and tried to hide in a shelf behind a load of food products. Now, officers detained him and also found a gun in the car. Now, this matched shell casing found near to the victim's body, and the autopsy confirmed that she had died of a gunshot wound. Now remember the plastic storage container that Mandy was originally found in. CCTV footage was discovered showing Derek buying that exact container, along with a shovel and a petrol can on the 4th of April. On CCTV, police also spotted Titan in the car with Derek at one point, and Titan was putting his head out the window almost like he wanted people to see him. Derek was arrested and charged with murder, and although he maintains his innocence, he was sentenced to life in prison. A motive has not yet been revealed. The prosecutors absolutely love Titan, as you can see here, and he was adopted by Mandy's best friend.
What I'm about to explain is one of the worst animal attacks ever caught on camera, and this is a massive trigger warning. This brutal video that I'm about to explain is only 1 minute long and is thought to have been filmed on December 22nd, 2014 in India. The backstory behind the video is very simple. On the morning of December 22nd, a group of hunters went out to hunt a sloth bear near the town of Surjapur. The reason they went out for the hunt was because of an increase in bear attacks on humans in the local area. A few days before the video was filmed, it is said that a female bear went into the local village and ransacked multiple homes, and even mauled a local to death. And obviously this caused a lot of panicking in the area, which is why the hunt took place, which was organized by the local forest department. The man in the video is referred to online as KP Singh, who was a forest worker. It is said that he had been tracking the bear for a while and even set up a trap to trap the dangerous predator. But he was then ambushed and mauled. His piercing screams got the attention of his colleagues, who would rush to the scene, and one of the victim's fellow hunters filmed the disturbing encounter. The clip is only 52 seconds, but the brutality of the video makes those 52 seconds feel like forever. I can't imagine the fear and pain the forest worker went through. As you play the video, you see a man who is wearing a green shirt laid out on the floor with a female sloth bear on top of him. And immediately, you hear the screams of the victim. And they are different from normal screams. I can't explain it, but they are truly disturbing. As the camera zooms in, you see the bear who has almost mounted the victim and has its jaws clamped around the victim's face. It looks like the bear is going for the throat. You hear loud commotion in the background as the crowd tries to distract the bear from the attack by shooting guns and throwing rocks at it. As the man wrestles for his life under the bear, you can see some of his injuries, with his face and throat covered in blood and the ground beneath his head stained with blood. You can see the bear bite his face and pull, ripping a chunk of flesh from his face. The bear then shakes its head to get rid of the blood on its face. It then goes in for another bite, and this time biting the poor man's throat and once again pulling its head away very sharply. It's hard to tell, but it appears a chunk of flesh is hanging from the victim's head. The video then concludes as the man is still getting mauled. According to reports, the attack lasted 10 minutes before the bear was finally shot and killed, though due to the man's injuries, he would later die. There's not much more information about this attack, but what you see on the video is absolutely disturbing, and the screams you hear are some of the worst screams you will ever hear.
Mark Dutroux is a monster, plain and simple. What he did is incomprehensible. He kidnapped children, locked them in a dungeon, raped and tortured them, then killed them. Some were left to starve to death, others were buried alive. Only 2 survived. Why was the police investigation such a debacle? And how many more people, important people, were involved in this evil plot? Questions which still haunt those 2 survivors.
I was his wife. He told me that. You're my new wife. Told me. He made up so many things.
8 years after she was freed, Sabine can't escape the nightmares or the image of her tormentor, the monster of Charleroi, Mark Dutroux, the most hated man in Europe.
He does not have any feelings to start with. He is a pervert. He was born without the feelings. They are not there. They are missing, so he cannot have them.
His first victims were best friends, Julie and Melissa, kept here for at least 7 months before being left to starve to death. How did the police react when you reported your daughter missing? Did they take it seriously?
No. No. Why? For who? For what? This is the question that I ask. Nobody has an answer for me.
Even today, with the house boarded up as a crime scene, it's impossible not to feel a chill, to sense the terror of the little girls torn from their families and imprisoned here.
He got caught because he went to kidnap a child in his own car on which he had put his own license plates. The only thing missing on that car was just the Mark Dutroux, kidnapper of children.
So he's stupid too.
Or there is one other solution. He knew that he was not going to be caught, that he was protected in some way.
The mother of Melissa, Karine Rousseau, has access to the legal evidence. She's found no answers, nothing to clarify who stole, raped and killed her daughter.
5 years on, there's still no admission from Dutroux. There's no material evidence, no witness statements which state that it was Dutroux who really kidnapped the children, who really raped them, and who really killed them.
There's a widespread belief that Dutroux was just one cog in a sophisticated network of pedophiles. Powerful people who used their influence to help him. So powerful, they included politicians, judges, even members of the royal household.
In the house of Dutroux and in the cellar also, they found a lot of DNA traces, and they were analyzed. In all those traces, you have 26 unknown people.
It's a catastrophe because nothing is any more clear today. Nothing is clear.
I think it's really incredible that with such evidence, you don't search further.
Dutroux was acting alone. This is the mantra repeated again and again in Belgium, with a certitude that for the victims' parents is inexplicable. They believe that investigators have blocked every lead, rejected every clue which would reveal that Dutroux was kidnapping girls for someone else. Other forensic tests that should have been routine were just not done. Human hairs collected from Dutroux's dungeon weren't sent for analysis. The logic was strange. They claimed that as there was no evidence anyone else had entered the cage, there was no need to analyze the hair. Prosecutor General Anne Tilly, who's in charge of the case. Can you explain why there was no DNA analysis done?
They were in a very putrefied state. They did not allow us to make an analysis of that type.
That's not what's written in the autopsy report. Again, the story doesn't square. The bodies weren't severely decomposed. DNA can be identified from samples taken long after death. The question remains unanswered. Why is there no DNA result? Might it have shown that someone else had raped Melissa?
There have been over 20 people connected to the Marc Dutroux case that have died in mysterious ways, including freak car accidents and drownings, and people are starting to question just how connected their government officials were to the beast of Belgium.
In a stunning move, over 300,000 Belgian citizens have gathered in the streets of their country to protest the government corruption that infected the Marc Dutroux case. These Belgians gathered in the streets believe that their own government officials, from local police all the way to the king himself, are involved in a satanic pedophile ring.
For the fifth consecutive day, tens of thousands of Belgians took to the streets. They demand a thorough overhaul of the country's justice system. Many Belgians believe that their authorities bungled the investigation of a child pornography and kidnapping ring. Despite tip-offs from the mother and girlfriend of the alleged ringleader, Marc Dutroux, police failed to act in time to prevent 4 of 6 missing girls being killed. Then the man who cracked the case and saved 2 of the girls was suddenly taken off the investigation. This sparked rumours of a cover-up.
Controversy in Belgium over news the ex-wife of a serial child killer is to move into the home of a former judge.
Most painful, perhaps, is the autopsy report, which shows Melissa had been repeatedly raped about 2 weeks before her death while Dutroux was in jail. So who raped this child? Dutroux denies he raped the girls.
How do you bear to live with what you already know?
I can't.
You can't say.
What do you go missing after getting out of a taxi one night and then end up dead in the water tank of a motel 13 days later with severe trauma to your body and signs of SA, all accidentally with no foul play? Because that's what the police are saying happened to her, and I am not buying it. This is the mysterious death of Debani Escobar, and nothing has disturbed me more than this last photo of her. Debani was an 18-year-old law student who disappeared on April 8th, 2022. That night, Debani went to a party with 2 of her friends at the Quinta Diamante estate in General Escobedo, Mexico. As the night went on, her behavior became more and more erratic, which was not like her. And at one point, she got into a fight with one of her friends and ended up locking herself inside the men's bathroom. What that fight was about is unknown, but her friends reportedly wanted to leave without her because of it. But before doing so, they called her a DD driver to pick her up from the party and take her home. A DD driver is like an Uber driver. And so the driver, who was a man, picked her up at 4:17 a.m. At some point during the drive, the 2 were seen on nearby security footage arguing in the car. And according to the the driver, he said it was because he was trying to ask Debani for her address and a guardian's phone number, but she refused to give it to him. The driver then says that Debani groped him, and these are just the words coming from his mouth. But according to Debani's dad, the security footage that was obtained actually shows the driver inappropriately touching Debani. After this altercation, Debani got out of the car right there on Highway 85 in Monterey, and this is reportedly an extremely dangerous stretch of road where many people have gone missing before. The driver then took this final photo of Debani alone, standing on the desolate highway in the middle of the night. He then texted this photo to the friend that scheduled this ride for Debani. I'm assuming that he did this because he wanted to explain the situation and let her know that Debani got out of the car. After waiting for several minutes to see if Debani would get back in, he drove off, leaving her alone. About 5 minutes later, Debani was seen on security footage walking to the Alcosa Transportation Offices, which is a trucking company in the Nueva Castilla neighborhood. But because it was so early, nobody was there to help her, so she walked away. Not long after this, Debani is seen on security footage again, arriving at the Nueva Castilla motel alone. This is a really almost run-down motel on the side of the road, and it looks pretty desolate. The last time Debani was seen alive was when she was caught on security footage looking through a restaurant's window. And that restaurant looks attached to the motel, but I could be wrong. It also kind of looks abandoned. After this, Debani disappeared, and what followed has never been explained. The next day, her dad reported her missing to the state attorney general's office, and a massive search for her began. And when I say massive, I mean hundreds of police officers and volunteers using drones and tracking dogs. The last photo that the driver took of Debani then went viral on social media, and this is what sparked the public outcry over her disappearance. So of course the driver was interviewed, but I guess authorities believed what he had to say because he was never arrested or charged with anything. The location of this photo was shared with police, and it was smack dab in the center of the 3 locations surrounding her disappearance and where she was last seen on security footage. Those locations were the house party to where she got out of the car, and then finally to the Nueva Castilla motel where she was last seen. So police searched the motel extensively, 4 times to be exact, but Debani was nowhere to be found. But then, 13 days later, a gruesome discovery would be made. One of the motel employees began noticing a foul smell coming from one of the water tanks, and it continuously got worse. So when they went to investigate, they opened the water tank and found a decomposing body. So needless to say, police were called, and the body was discovered to be Debani's. But she was so decomposed at this point that the only way they could tell it was her was by the necklace that she was wearing. They then found her purse in the next water tank and her phone and keys in the third. This is incredibly sad because this was only a block and a half away from the trucking company where she tried to get help. According to the government's autopsy, they said that Debani fell into the underground 12-foot water tank, hit her head, and drowned, and that this was all just a tragic accident with no foul play involved. But Debani's dad didn't trust this, and he had a gut feeling that something wasn't right. And this was mainly because the police had already searched the motel's property 4 times before she was found. He thought that something was trying to be covered up, so he had a second independent autopsy done, and the findings are bizarre. This autopsy found that Debani had been sexually assaulted and physically abused before she died, and the official cause of death was from a deep cranial contusion. So because of these findings, there were many rallies and protests in Mexico that called for a more thorough investigation into Debani's death. One thing that would have helped tremendously in the beginning while searching for Debani was security footage from inside the motel. But the manager of the motel, along with one of the front desk employees, claimed that there was no security footage to be given. They said the motel does have cameras, but that they don't record and are strictly for monitoring purposes. But suddenly, out of nowhere, hours of video footage emerged that shed some light into what happened the night Debani disappeared. Video footage from the motel showed Debani entering the property that night alone, but instead of going to the front desk, she went to a garden out of sight. About 20 minutes later, she's seen walking by the motel's empty pool and towards the water tank, and that was the last time she was ever seen alive. Because of how shady everything seemed, a third autopsy was conducted that required Debani be exhumed, and surprisingly, the results were more grave than before. This final autopsy showed that Debani actually died from asphyxiation. She had been strangled, and absolutely no water was found in her lungs. Her body showed extreme signs of violence, and the results also showed that she died between 3 and 5 days before she was found, meaning that she was alive for possibly up to 10 days before dying, which leads me to ask, where was she during that time? So many aspects of this case are still unexplained. First off, with her behavior being erratic the night she went missing, it seems likely that she could have possibly been drugged drugged? And why was the first official government autopsy so wrong? Was it due to incompetence or corruption? Because of how fast they pushed that this was an accident, many people, including Debani's family, feel like this was a cover-up. Her family believes that her body was somehow planted in the water tank because there is a ton of evidence that this was no accident. Some people suspect the driver because after one of Debani's friends called to pick her up, he mysteriously turned off his driving app. Some believe that the motel is responsible because they lied about the security footage. And in fact, both of those employees were actually accused of making false declarations and concealing evidence, which is a weird thing to do if you're innocent. There is a possibility that somebody followed her into the motel from the trucking company that she stopped at, or even one of the guests at the motel. But unfortunately, since the video footage was withheld and everything around that being so sketchy, I don't trust that it wasn't tampered with in some way. What's crazy is the fact that while searching for Debani, 5 other missing young girls were found in the process. But as of today, no one has ever been arrested in connection to her case. It's now been 2 years, and Debani's death is still unexplained and unsolved, and how she ended up in the water tank that night remains a mystery.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
On Monday, the 27th of March 2023, America had its 139th school shooting just this year. Police started to receive calls at 10:13 a.m. to say there was an active shooter at the Nashville Covenant School. That shooter was 28-year-old Audrey Hale. Audrey had gained access into the school by shooting her way through some glass doors, first killing Mike Hill. She then roamed the halls with her guns looking for more victims. The other 5 victims were head teacher Catherine Kuntz, supply teacher Cynthia Peake, and 9-year-olds Evelyn, William and Hallie. Police responded incredibly quickly and they've been hailed as heroes for it taking only 4 minutes for them entering the building to finding the shooter. I just find it absolutely horrific that this is the 139th school shooting in just 3 months in the USA. And my thoughts obviously go out to all the victims and their families.
Curdling facts that you wish you never knew. Part 23. In 2008, 3 Texas teenagers were arrested after they dug up a skeleton and used the skull as a bong. The police later found that the skull belonged to an 11-year-old boy. While uncommon, there have been many cases of people's intestines being sucked out by vacuum toilets on airplanes. So if you want to keep your rectum, be sure to stand up before you flush. Every single fig has had at least 1 wasp die inside of it. Nosebleeds can bleed out of your eye sockets. And it's possible to be allergic to your own blood. There's a rare phenomenon called a stone baby where a fetus dies and doesn't get absorbed by the body. And people have been known to carry these fetuses for up to 40 years, completely unaware. There's a shack in Louisiana called the Devil's Toy Box where people supposedly lose their minds after spending any amount of time there. This story's over, you're gonna remember 3 words. A college student went backpacking alone for a few weeks in the Austrian mountains. He was in the middle of the wilderness with no human in sight for miles. Over the course of nearly 3 weeks, he saw only 1 other person paddling along in a canoe across the water. About halfway through the trip, the boy was very low on supplies. His phone was almost dead, he was out of food, and he only had 1 plastic water bottle left. He dug through his bag and luckily found a disposable camera, so he was able to capture a few pictures along the way. When he returned home, he got the pictures developed and began to look through them. He sorted through about 15 or so nature shots until he came across a picture that stood out to him. It was a photo of the boy sleeping on his stomach. He was shirtless and his back was covered in blood. He immediately took off his shirt to discover his back was scarred with 3 words etched on his skin. And if you want to know what the 3 words were, go to Liquid Death's page to find out.
This is Jane. She used to be a neighbour of the infamous Jeff the Killer prior to him losing his mind. Once he started murdering people, Jane's parents soon fell victim to the maniacal Jeff the Killer. Jane herself was also attacked by Jeff, and he left her for dead after setting her on fire, but she managed to survive. She was in hospital for 2 weeks before she finally woke up. The attack had ironically left Jane with bleached white skin, which is reminiscent of Jeff's appearance. She then received a package with a taunting note attached. It was from Jeff. The package contained a white mask with black layers covering the eye holes. Jane swore revenge on Jeff and vowed to kill him. One day, at another of Jeff's crime scenes, police found a note. Confused as it was addressed to Jeff rather than being from him, The letter revealed there was another killer out there. They were killing people not because they hated them, but because they imagined them to be Jeff. The final words read, "I'm coming for you, sleep well." Signed, Jane the Killer. This is the Rake. It's a quadruped humanoid creature, which is said to attack and scare humans for reasons not known. The Rake has been described as both a 6-foot human who walks on all fours with pale skin, and a hairless dog. It gets its name from its long claws on its hands, which resemble that of a garden rake. The earliest known mention of the Rake is in a mariner's log dated 1691. In it, the mariner explains how he and his crew had recently landed in the New World, and the Rake forced them to leave. It also allegedly took everything from them and their ship. A famous Spanish journal entry from 1880 also mentions the Rake. It's described as having hollow black eyes, which cause great psychological trauma and terror. More modern sightings say they woke up in the early hours to see the Rake staring at them, before crawling away. It typically just stares at you, but will stand up and attack you if provoked. The key thing to do if you see the Rake is to not touch it, and if possible, don't show any fear. Do that and you might just survive the night.
Welcome to another installation of Killers That Got Caught Because They're Idiots. Today we're talking about the guy that tried to kidnap a barista in Washington on Monday. And while he's not a killer and it's unclear if that was his intention, he's still an idiot, so he's on the list. In this video, you can see here where Matthew Darnell tried to kidnap a barista by pulling her through the small drive-through window. It's unclear why he thought that would work, but thank God it was his plan because the barista was basically uninjured in the whole ordeal. Let's now take a look at this large and identifiable tattoo that says Chevrolet in cursive that ultimately helped the police identify Matthew. I'm not here to tattoo shame anyone, but maybe don't commit a crime where the only two parts of you caught on security footage are your face and a hyper-specific tattoo that is unique to you. Also, as he's leaving, he stops here, and I don't know if that's to collect the $5 in loose change that she dropped. But as he's leaving, we get a really great glimpse of the back of his truck and his license plate, which also helped the police identify him. Matthew is currently being held on a $500,000 bail, but let's hope he never gets out.
This is the worrying disappearance of a girl who disappeared after her sister's graduation party. Jasmine Smith was 22 years old, living in Warren. On the 5th of June 2015, she travelled to Farrell in Pennsylvania to celebrate her sister's high school graduation. The trip was only around half an hour long, so her family were actually happy to wave her off after the event, knowing it wouldn't take long for her to get home. However, then 3 whole weeks would go by without them being able to get in contact with Jasmine. They reported the young woman missing to police, who disturbingly would hear news not long after of another girl, Alicia Bell, going missing. If you've not seen my video on the disappearance of Alicia, check it out, I've just posted it before this one. Essentially, Alicia, pictured above, went missing from the same area. Her remains were later found in a burn pit on the property of James Brooks. He was convicted of her murder. Jasmine's family fear that she may have become prey to this killer too. At the time of her disappearance, Jasmine was 5'7" and weighed 145 pounds. She's got several distinguishable tattoos, a heart and arrow near the corner of her eye on her upper cheek, and the word Bubby inside of a heart on her upper arm. Anyone with any information is urged to call police.
You have to see this video. Reddit user Whom Is You claims that they received a phone call from their dead mother. He says that he's 15 and that this all happened about 9 months ago, when his mother died from cancer. After his mother's death, he moved in with his uncle. About 2 months later, on September 22nd, he had his name day, which is a tradition in Latvian culture. He said he woke up to a call and he answered it. On the call, he heard his mother's voice talking to him. She was asking questions like, "How are you?" and "Is everything okay?" After the questions and talking with her, he suddenly got a knock on the door. It was his uncle's girlfriend who walked in and said, "Wake up, it's time for school." She then walked out of the room. He says that it was at this moment that he got up and decided to look at his phone. And when he checked his call history, his mother's number wasn't on it. Later that day, he asked his uncle's girlfriend if she had heard him talking on the phone earlier that morning. She said no. So what do you guys think? Was this just some strange, vivid dream? Could he have really been talking to his mother's ghost? Or was this some sort of entity that was posing as his mother?
You guys heard of the haunted house that requires you to sign a 40-page waiver? The McCamey Manor that's located in Somerville, Tennessee is described to be like a torture chamber. But before even stepping into this haunted house, you would need to complete a phone screen, a background check, and sign a 40-page waiver. And then if all that's approved, you'd have to watch a 2-hour video of every person who has attempted to complete the haunted house in the past 2 years. So what exactly makes this haunted house so scary? Well, not only can this experience last up to 10 hours of physical and mental torture, but it's been said that people are waterboarded, forced to eat nasty things, and duct taped. This waiver even states that participants must be okay with workers torturing them however they see fit. Some people claim that they were forced to take a pill that caused them to hallucinate, and apparently it's so bad that they had to seek professional help after they went through the experience. But Russ, who's a founder, says that participants are not being tortured, rather they're being put under hypnosis, making them believe that something scary is happening when in reality it's not. What's interesting about this challenge is that participants can win $20,000 if they can withstand the experience, but there has not been a winner so far. What's crazy is that people have petitioned to try and shut down this attraction because of how traumatic it is, but it's still operating till this day. Comment below if you'd participate in this haunted house.
Have you ever wondered how accurate police sketches are? I'm going to show you some sketches, then I'm going to show you the person that was caught, and we're going to see. And I cover all things spooky on this channel, so make sure you follow along. So this photo right here is a police sketch of the original Night Stalker, also known as the Golden State Killer. The Golden State Killer is known for terrorizing California in the 70s and 80s. So it took a really long time for them to be able to catch the Golden State Killer, and part of the reason is they thought that he was 2 different killers at first. They thought it was one person who was responsible for a bunch of SAs that were happening in Northern California, and then a separate person that years later was responsible for taking people's lives. But DNA evidence proved that it was one man, and these are some sketches of him. One thing that really stands out to me is this like all-American kind of boy next door look that he almost has. In 2018, DNA evidence proved that it was Joseph D'Angelo who was the Golden State Killer, but let's look at some pictures of him when he was younger. The other photos to me don't look as similar, but this is spot on to me. There's so many little details in this photo that are correct, from the swoopy hair to the chubby cheeks and the thin lips. Like even the ears look identical. And you'll notice here that he is in a cop uniform because he was a cop, which is something that they figured because of the nature of his crimes. One thing that he would do to victims was he would wake them up by shining a flashlight into their eyes, which is something that the police would use to disorient people that they were arresting. Ultimately, it was DNA evidence from a genealogical database that put him away, but I'm a little bit surprised they didn't catch him based on the sketch because it looks so similar to me.
This case is one of those cases that have you questioning humanity. Alex Murdo was a successful and well-known lawyer in South Carolina who murdered his wife and 22-year-old son on June 7th, 2021. He shot them both at close range in their 1,700-acre estate home and then called 911 and said that he found them like that when he arrived. Investigators believe that his motive was to conceal financial corruption that he had caused for so many years. You see, Alex wasn't such a great guy. He was stealing from his law partners and clients to fund his addiction and lavish lifestyle. Alex embezzled millions of dollars and had been doing this since 2015. And get this, one of the clients that he actually stole from was the family of his housekeeper who mysteriously passed away in his home after working for them for 20 years. Prosecutors believe that he murdered his wife and son to gain sympathy from others in the community so that people would forget about everything he did in the past. The Murdo family comes from a lot of money and status, and people really knew who they were because this wealthy family has been around for decades. Now, some people still believe that Alex is innocent because of how emotional he was, but it only took the jury 45 minutes to find him guilty. After Alex murdered his son and wife, so many secrets were exposed from people closest to the Murdo family. And it's alleged that Alex was involved in concealing a few other murders as well. There's now even a Netflix series called Murdo Murders and Southern Scandal, and it dives deep into everything.
Jumped off a bridge because I couldn't stand living any longer.
Bruh.
My name is Etika, a famous YouTuber, and let me tell you my sad story. I was born on May 12, 1990 in New York City. Since a young age, I loved playing games on the computer, and in 2007 I began sharing that on YouTube. I started the channel called Etika World Network, and after some time I began to gain some popularity. I became known for my highly energetic reactions to Super Smash Bros. Character reveals and Nintendo Direct presentations, and for playing and reacting to various games. This caused me to go viral, and quickly, I became a big internet sensation. However, between 2018 and 2019, I began to struggle with my mental health. I threatened to commit suicide on multiple occasions, and I was being hospitalized several times. Online, I received hate from various people, which was also not easy to endure. My mental state didn't improve, unfortunately. On June 19, 2019, I tragically decided to take my own life by jumping off the Manhattan Bridge. The world had lost a beautiful soul and a young man who brought a smile to the faces of his millions of viewers daily. Share in the comments how you discovered his channel or your favorite memory to pay tribute to him. May Etika rest in peace.
Teenager sent a disturbing text to her mum before going missing. What happened next is horrifying. Alicia Bell was just 18 years old when she left her mum's house to go to her relatives in Ohio. It was the 23rd of July, 2015. However, shortly after leaving the house, Alicia sent her mum a frantic text message. It said, "Mum, if I make it home, I need you, I'm scared." Understandably panicked, her mum then desperately tried to call her daughter. She called over and over, but worryingly the calls kept going to voicemail. Alicia never arrived at her relative's house and was never seen alive again. Alicia was reported missing and police got to work trying to figure out what had happened. However, initially they had no luck. That was until August when they raided the home of 40-year-old James Brooks. Initially this was unrelated. They were actually raiding his home to try and find substances. It was at this point that they found a lot more than they bargained for. Horrifically, James had human remains in his garden in the burn pit. Police were suspicious that this may be the missing teenager. James actually knew her family and incorrectly they thought he was harmless. He was arrested and charged with abuse of a corpse amongst many other unrelated charges. Forensics tragically confirmed the remains were that of Alicia. In May 2016, James was facing numerous charges relating to manslaughter, trafficking, abduction, and substance charges. Prosecutors believed that James was trafficking multiple girls, including Alicia, but the trafficking charges were for some reason dropped. He eventually pleaded guilty to all charges relating to Alicia's death. He was given 30 years in prison. Now, James is interestingly a person of interest in the disappearance of another missing girl. This is a girl from the same area called Jasmine Smith. She actually went missing a month before Alicia. Let me know if you'd like me to cover Jasmine's disappearance.
I'm not even sure where to start with this one. This is a story of 3-year-old Sutton Mosser. It's pretty graphic, so viewer discretion is advised. Sutton lived with her mother Justine, her grandparents and her 2 uncles in Michigan and was the absolute centre of everybody's world. On September 14th, 2021, Sutton turned 3. 2 days later, her life ended in the most brutal way. Sutton had been left at home in her mother's care, somewhere she should have been perfectly safe. On September 16th, around 10 p.m, Sutton's uncle arrived home to an empty house. He didn't look for his sister or niece, but when his brother arrived home a few hours later and asked where they were, they decided to go and see if they were in the back room. What they found in that back room they could not have prepared themselves for. They saw a garbage bag with a foot sticking out. They decided to call their uncle, who arrived at the house, and then called the emergency services. Police and paramedics arrived and found 3-year-old Sutton wrapped in a comforter and stuffed inside a bin bag. She had stab wounds to her neck, chest, and a gaping wound in her abdomen, exposing her intestines. She'd been stabbed a total of 17 times. There was a blood-stained pair of jeans in the bag with her, and bloody handprints on the bag and walls, as well as 3 knives recovered from the bedroom. One of the bloody handprints on the wall was found to be Sutton's. The rest were those of her mother Justine. Police located Justine at 8:30 a.m. on September 17th, walking along railroad tracks. She showed absolutely no emotion when the police told her that her daughter was dead, and she was arrested. Justine told police that she'd been having hallucinations, and it was cartoon character SpongeBob SquarePants that had told her to murder her daughter, or she'd be killed instead. She said she'd been abusing heroin and meth and was having withdrawal symptoms causing hallucinations. She couldn't remember her daughter being left alone with her, or a single detail about murdering her. She had, however, had the mental capacity to change into clean clothes after murdering her daughter. She pleaded guilty to first-degree felony murder and first-degree child abuse, saying that if it was her that killed her daughter, she deserved to be punished. She was given a life sentence without the possibility of parole, plus 50 years for the child abuse charge. She'll spend the rest of her life in prison.
Did you know that there's an alien buried in the state of Texas? And yes, I'm talking about the corpse of an extraterrestrial being. So this is the Aurora Cemetery in Aurora, Texas. It's in North Texas. And yes, inside of the cemetery, there is a grave that belongs to a supposedly extraterrestrial being. So this alien plane crash actually happened supposedly in 1897. On April 17th of that year, an alien UFO supposedly crashed into a windmill and crash landed on the property of local judge J.S. Proctor. This is actually what the crash site looks like today. I love how they've kind of gone with the theme. But everybody who came to look at the remains of this alien ship noticed that the person inside of it that was piloting it was not of this world. They even called it in the original news report a Martian. So what's interesting is that the town allegedly got together and decided that this alien deserved a Christian burial. So they brought it to the Aurora Cemetery and buried the alien in a Christian ceremony. Here's what the gravesite used to look like. It's got a little UFO on the side of it. So, allegedly, the wreckage from the crash was dumped into a nearby well, which was underneath the windmill that was damaged, and the rest of the wreckage was actually buried with this alien's body. So, in 1935, another man bought the crash site property from Judge J.S. Proctor, and he cleaned out the well, got rid of all the wreckage, but he claims that after drinking the water that was in the well, he developed a severe case of arthritis, and thus he covered the well up with a concrete slab and sealed it permanently. So this is where the grave is marked today. I actually visited this cemetery a few years ago, and it's really strange to think that an alien might be buried here. So various alien researchers have visited the cemetery and they've came to some pretty shocking conclusions. So at one point, people tried to deny the story and say that it was a hoax and that a windmill never existed on the original property. But a television crew actually found the remains of an old windmill there. And the guy who actually owns the land allowed a TV crew to unseal the well. They found a large amount of aluminum in the well, and the landowner actually gave them pieces of the wreckage. When they analyzed it, they found that the wreckage was made of aluminum and another unknown element. They couldn't figure out what it was made out of. And then we get to the grave, and this is crazy. So people have repeatedly asked the city for permission to dig up this unmarked grave. But the cemetery actually denies people that request every single time. I don't know why they're denying this request, if they just want to keep the mystery alive or what, but nobody knows what's buried there. And interestingly enough, another TV crew came out and did ground-penetrating radar, and they did detect an anomaly, which meant that there is more than likely a chance that there is a body under there. But because it was so badly deteriorated, they couldn't get good readings, and they don't know what the remains belong to. So yeah, I would love for somebody to finally figure out this mystery, because it's something that keeps me awake at night. But if you ever want to visit it, you can go to the Aurora Cemetery, and they actually have a plaque that tells the story of the alien that's buried there.
What? Nothing there, mate. Nothing there. What? There's nothing there.
Welcome back to our YouTube channel. After murdering, day 3 after murdering somebody.
Wow! Don't put that on the camera.
It was worth it.
And we had sex a lot.
The full video and transcript of the video that I just showed you is incredibly disturbing. Yes, you heard what they said correctly. This 18-year-old named Aaron Guerrero said murdering somebody was worth it. But who did this teenage couple just murder together? Well, it was none other than 16-year-old Sierra Halseth's father, Daniel Halseth. So at the time, Sierra was living with her father, Daniel. Daniel seemed like your everyday father. He prioritized fitness, he posted frequently on social media, and his posts frequently involved his family, including his 16-year-old daughter, Sierra. Now, before the murder happened, Sierra's parents, Daniel and Elizabeth, had gone through a bitter divorce. In October of 2011, Daniel was assaulted for open and gross lewdness after his wife said he assaulted her. Then there were allegations that Elizabeth had been cheating on Daniel, and obviously they just had a terrible marriage. But at some point along the way, 16-year-old Sierra crossed paths with 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero, and the young couple quickly fell in love. So at some point, Sierra told Aaron that her father, Daniel, was abusive towards her, both physically and sexually. And according to the two of them, they felt like the only way to make this right was to murder Sierra's blood father. So in April of 2021, the two came up with a plan. I should also add in here that Aaron and Sierra had dated in 2020 before both of their parents had separated them and said they were bad for each other. They had also learned that the two were planning on running off to Los Angeles together, and since Sierra was only 16 at the time, obviously her dad said no. So the day before Daniel's body was found, Aaron ran away from home and disappeared. And the two teenagers then purchased a circular saw, saw blades, bleach, lighter fluid, disposable gloves, and a drop cloth from a local hardware store. Now, Aaron claims that he carried out this murder because he was on LSD at the time of the murder, but I've never seen that actually proven. So on that day in April of 2021, Sierra and Aaron entered the Halseth home. They then stabbed Daniel Halseth 70 times. They cut his body up, they set fire to it, and they attempted to burn down his house. And at one point shortly afterwards, a woman named Peggy and her friend entered Daniel's home and noticed that his front door was open. They then smelled smoke and noticed a large burned patch on the living room floor. Afterwards, they entered the garage and noticed the smell of lighter fluid. They also saw a sleeping bag on the floor, and when they opened up the sleeping bag, they saw the charred and mutilated remains of Daniel Halseth. So Sierra and Aaron then stole Daniel's car and went on the run, and they were eventually arrested in Salt Lake City, Utah, just a few days after killing Sierra's dad. And it was 3 days after the murder when they made that disturbing video where they giggle and laugh about murdering Daniel. So eventually, after a lengthy trial and all these details became public, Sierra and Aaron were sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 22 years. So they are in prison now, and I think that video remains one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. The complete lack of empathy and the almost cheeriness, happiness that they both have within them, even after murdering Sierra's father.
This is the disturbing case of the child who killed a child. In July 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was abducted from her bed. She'd been staying with her grandparents in the Isle of Bute. She'd gone to sleep watching Peppa Pig, and no one had any idea of the horrors that would unfold that evening. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Aaron Campbell was drinking with friends at his house. Aaron apparently became upset in the night because he had been arguing with his mum. He had had a challenging upbringing involving physical and emotional abuse. Aaron decided that evening he wanted to get some substances to smoke from a couple that he knew. The couple in question were Alicia's dad Robert and his girlfriend. They'd been known to sell substances to Aaron previously, but he could not get hold of them. Intending to go and steal them off them, Aaron armed himself with a knife. He headed to Robert's house where he lived with his parents and girlfriend. This was obviously where Alicia was staying that evening. When he arrived at the house, he noticed the 6-year-old sleeping in her bed and took the opportunity to snatch the poor defenseless young child. Disgustingly, he carried her to a secluded location, SA'd her, and then killed her. He then disposed of his clothes in the sea. At 6 a.m. the next day, Alicia's grandparents woke up to discover that the little girl was missing. They straight away alerted police and locals. When the family asked Aaron to keep an eye out for the little girl, he texted them back saying, "Oh damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." A local man soon discovered Alicia's lifeless body around 15 minutes away from her house. Along with a lot of the local community, Aaron's mum actually checked her CCTV of her house. She was hoping that this would help with the investigation, and it definitely did. She saw her son leaving and returning from the house that night, and she handed the evidence over to police. Aaron was arrested, and it was discovered that the clothes that he'd abandoned on the beach did actually match with his DNA. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.